past is history, the future mystery. This moment is the gift.
Welcome, miracle makers. I am so grateful that you're here today. I am so excited by our guests, so excited to share our date. Greg Larsen is in the house. This is Dr. Sarah Larsen speaking, and we are inviting you to come be with us on one of the best shows that we're going to have. We've got in the house with us Dr. Ibrahim Jaffe. And we've been talking pre-show about magnificent things. And we can't wait to bring you in today. And today you're going to find in your journey, as we're talking with Dr. Jaffe, the path of consciousness, the path of love, the path of a mystic and a Sufi, and how to bring more miracles into your life with his way of setting intentions, with the conversation that we're going to have today. Baby, I'm so glad you're here and we get to share this.
Yes, thank you, my love. I am so excited for this also because as I'm sitting here, I can feel your depth and your wisdom. So I'm anticipating what will emerge from this conversation today. So thank you for being here.
So, Dr. Jaffe, welcome to UBN. Welcome to Miracle Makers. We're so excited to have you. This is the oldest studio in Hollywood. And I love the energy that's here and your sounds emanating through this building and through what Hollywood represents out to the world. So thank you for making time.
I got chills over my whole body as you say that. That's something very profound in there.
Yeah,
it's beautiful.
I haven't said enough about your bio yet. And so would you fill us in? You're a medical doctor. That's where the doctor comes from.
Yes.
And you are a mystic.
Yes.
And you're a practicing MD. And most of your work comes through the spiritual nature of medicine versus the physical chemical measure of medicine.
That's right. Well, I trained in Chicago, University of Illinois. I was on my way to become a general practitioner, was going to go into cardiac medicine. I loved the ICU, and I loved being around death. And it was a very exciting time to be able to either save a life or watch the life, whatever happened in those moments is very powerful. But one day, a young Jewish girl came in. She was 17, and she was dying of chronic hepatitis. And I had her end stage. She was, she had ascites and, where the fluid in the belly. And she was in coma. And it was, one of those really sad things where you see, I think young people dying is so hard.
It's very
It was hard for me.
Yeah.
And it was the first one I really had dealt with at that level. And I remember I put my stethoscope on her heart to listen to her vital signs. And I swear to God, something literally jumped out of her chest into my hand. I fell on the floor. I didn't know what happened. I thought I was having a heart attack. And this cold energy came into my body, and I thought, oh, my God, what is going on with this girl? So I got a little bit frightened at that point, and I thought, all right, I don't know what this is all about. It's something beyond traditional medicine. Well, the next day, the entire Orthodox Jewish community in Chicago shows up, the rabbis. There's 20 or 30 of them. And they came in with a box of doves. And they had called to Jerusalem, and they had found that if you take a dove and you cleared off its belly and you placed it over the belly button, that it would pull the energy of hepatitis out of the person. And if the dove died, it would begin to heal the person. This was in the Talmud, ancient Jewish book. So I thought, well, amazing, I have to watch this. And I'm saying to everybody, I got to watch this. The doctors were going crazy. They were like, what? No, you can't do this. This is magic. This is bad stuff. This is nonsense. I said, no. I said, let me watch. We went in. They took that first dove, a big dove. They put it on the belly button. The dove goes one breath and fell over dead.
Wow.
And they went through 18 doves in 2 hours. And this was a girl who was on full dose Levophed, which is
Wow. Very strong.
very strong. And
Yeah.
even with Levophed, to bring the pressure up, her pressure was 60 over 0. They couldn't find the diastolic.
Wow.
And at the end of the 3 hours, her entire vital signs had returned to normal. The Levophed had been cut down to nothing.
Yeah.
Everything had returned. And at that moment, the doctors in the hospital came in and said, you have to get the doves out of here, and we don't allow this. So the rabbis just kind of oddly picked up and just walked out, not a word. And unfortunately, later she died, but whatever was in her was gone. You know, like whatever that thing that jumped out of her, it was like it disappeared. So I realized that this was the kind of medicine I wanted to learn, not just giving cortisone and Levophed and
Not
chemo.
just doing the chemistry. That's exactly why, because being an MD, it's very hard to just treat a symptom and not get to the root cause. And also, there's so much love involved between a doctor and a patient.
Yes.
But when you truly, most of the people that I know that went into medicine truly love their profession, love their patients.
Yes.
And after a short period of time, when the medicine's not making you better, there's something, and you know that there's a spiritual component
Yes.
that's not being addressed at all. You begin exploring the spiritual components.
Exactly.
And so this is what I love. And what year was that?
That was 1982, maybe.
In 1982. In 1982, hospitals were so sterile. There was no Deepak Chopra. Today, it might be accepted. There might be something like that. But for a doctor to stand and allow a ceremony that's been written about for thousands of years
Yes.
and shared, passed down generation to generation.
Yes.
And today, the medical industry in our country, we are somewhere between below Morocco with our healthcare system.
Really that bad.
We're really that bad at this point. Whereas most of the other, I think we do great in emergency medicine. I think we do great in a lot of research and development areas. But a lot of the spiritual components, hepatitis C is infectious. It's passed down through the bloodstream. It affects the liver.
Yeah.
And there have been many cases of people spiritually, when they get connected and purified, where it no longer, the antibody, the diagnosis can no longer be said that they have it. They're just a carrier of it.
That's right.
But it's not an active disease.
Exactly.
And in 1982, for you to stand up for that, you had bravo for doing that.
Thank you.
I know that you yourself have had several health crises as well.
Well, I was blinded when I was in college. I used to wrestle for the Illini, and I wrestled Purdue University, and the guy kneed me in the eye, and he had very bad scabs all over his knee. Didn't know what they were, but it hit me in the eye, and the virus transmitted into my eye. And so shortly after that, I had my first outbreak of the virus. And within about a year or two, I was blind in my right eye from the knee.
Wow.
So by the time I was 27, I had multiple recurrences, and I had lost my sight completely, and I had a very, very bad outbreak. And everybody gave up on me. I went to Harvard, I went to Yale, I went to Bascom Palmer in Florida. They said, there's no hope. And they also said that there's a good chance that virus is going to jump into your brain and you're going to die. So there was kind of I was nervous about the whole thing. Like, what's going to happen here? So I began looking, alternatively. And I began looking alternatively, and I explored everything from NLP to emotional work. I went sitting with gurus and hoping for the baraka, the blessings. Nothing worked. worked. Nothing worked. And then one day, I just lost. It was like 6-7 months of pain because it was very painful, and I started crying and screaming. I just couldn't handle it anymore. And as I let the deepest place of anger and pain out, I mean, again, remember, I couldn't see anything but blackness in that eye. There became, all of a sudden, I started to see spinning white light. It began to spin, and then it began to flicker and reorganize itself. And as it spun and reorganized, there was a popping sound, and the light shot out of my eye. And for the first time in like 7 months, I could see.
Wow.
And it took all of 3 minutes.
And
What would be your, what did you think caused it then?
Well, I knew instantaneously that it was the emotional release.
Just emotional release, yeah.
And getting that I had been controlling my anger, and there were things I didn't want to see. Because the minute the anger opened, it started flooding in with memories of all sorts of things, like medical school, like having to push down my spirituality to be accepted.
Yeah.
And then with my father, who was a brilliant chemist, but not open spiritually, and I had to keep that part of me down as well. And these images kept coming up, and as each one cleared, within a matter of 3 weeks, I had completely had my sight back.
Wow.
that is incredible.
An amazing story.
It's
Well,
a
see, that's
medical
that's
miracle.
Miracle right there.
It's
Yeah,
a
yeah,
medical
yeah.
miracle, absolutely, to have that experience, this sight, especially when you were told you would be blind in both eyes, and then to be at risk prognosis death.
Exactly.
Yes, that is quite amazing. The spiritual aspects to your healing, this is something that you've seen over and over again
Yes.
in your practice. And for our group listening, those that are hearing this, because we do press down emotions. We've been told over and over again, you act this way. We suppress our natural evolution
Yes.
and abilities. So as a physician that you yourself went through this process,
Yes.
as someone who teaches this, where do you begin?
Well, things have changed a lot over the years. So that was my beginning point. In a way, I would call that my kindergarten. Now it's been 20 years or 25 years. So it's different now. As a Sufi, we working in a whole different realm, which,
I would love to share, even before you go into the Sufi, you were born Jewish.
yes.
And you converted.
Yes.
And very devout. I can feel your entire life you were very devout to finding
Yes.
source.
That's right.
And so what led you to Sufism? And what does Sufism mean for those that don't? To be a Sufi, what does that mean?
Well, a Sufi is one who's purified their heart and their soul. So that's really Sufism means purity. It is the mystical inner dimension of Islam. It has been the major movement towards peace. If there's any peaceful, loving, mystical, conscious side of Islam, it's Sufism. And Sufism has tried to bring peace throughout the entire world and has been very successful in that over the centuries. And so I was very blessed when I was in my 30s to meet what I believe to be one of the great Sufi masters of this time, who just died, as a matter of a few months ago. And I walked in. At that point, I had gotten sick again. I seem to have had a lot of illnesses in my life. This time I had contracted a virus, and I had congestive heart failure. So I was starting to die from congestive heart failure at 36. And I had been, I just knew in my heart that it wasn't going to be medicine that healed me. And I said, I prayed about it. I said, what is the source of heart disease? And the answer, of course, was love. And that I didn't know love. And I was married, and my wife and I were struggling with our marriage, and we were having trouble at that time. And I knew that the source of the problem was the lack of love between us. And I started praying, well, where do you go to learn love? Who do you go to?
Yeah.
Do you go to, there are people out there, you can go to bhakti yogis, and I didn't know, I thought about Christianity. I looked into Jesus because Jesus was supposed to be love, but I didn't find the understanding of healing that Jesus carried. And I knew I was dying. I had given me 6 months, so I didn't have a lot of time to kind of play around and find somebody who didn't know. I needed to find somebody who was going to heal me or I was dead. And I heard about this Sufi master, and he came and he said, I met him in Santa Fe. He'd come out to Santa Fe, and I walked in the room and didn't know me from Adam, and he looked at me, and you know, like when people have that kind of translucent look in their eyes and they kind of disappear. I felt the translucence, you know, he disappeared for a moment, and then he came back, and he looks at me, he says, you're dying. And I said, how did you know that? He said, oh, I know. And he said, you have heart disease. And I said, you're right. And he said, you have 6 months to live. I said, you're absolutely right. I said, how could you tell that? Yeah, you know, and he said something which was kind of very strong. He said, when you know God, God can reveal anything about anybody to you.
Yeah.
So I said, okay. And I said, then would you please go and ask God to reveal how to heal me, because I've got 6 months to live. And he did. And he went in and he prayed about it. And he came back and he said, the problem for you is that you don't know how to love. You have been doing your spirituality from your mind. And you're from your vision, from your consciousness, but you're not doing it from your heart. And your spirituality your mind has jumped so far, but your heart has not understood what you have perceived. And the imbalance between your heart and your mind is what's killing you. That's what he told me. So I said, how do you change that? He said, well, you have to learn how to do spirituality from your heart, not from your consciousness. I said, can you teach me? Yes. He said, but you're going to have to give up everything. You willing to drop it and start from the beginning? I said, 6 months to live. Come on. It's not hard. It's not a hard choice, and I did. And 6 months later, he had the heart disease was gone. And, here I am 20 years later, and healthy as can be.
Oh, that is so beautiful. Miracle makers, the longest journey you take is from your heart from your head to your heart is the longest journey that you take. And when you live from your heart, there isn't anything you can't do. One of the points that I heard you say was, and this is within so much of our belief system, you know God, you know Source, you know the Creator.
Yes.
And that reveals all to you.
Yes.
And your service, your song, whatever you do in life, as deeply as you can, go into that arena. Everyone searching for you, everyone you're searching for will find you there.
Yes.
Everything that you need is found there. So miracle makers, how did you start meditating, or how did you start praying, or how did you start that journey into your heart?
Well, again, I had initially, grown up in the religion, but when I, kind of left, I ended up in India. And I did Vipassana meditation.
Yes.
And I loved it. I mean,
Vipassana meditation is 10 days of silent retreat at least, and everything's taken care of for you. All you do is sit and center on being present.
With your breath.
Through breath.
And it's so beautiful and conscious. Your consciousness just flies. And I loved it. I spent the next, 15 years just sitting. I'd sit for 2 hours every day, silently meditating. But something was also not working for me. Like behind it, there was some level of something was missing, and I could feel it. It was like I was quiet, I was present, I could sit silently for 2 hours watching the clouds go by. But in my heart, the love and the presence of divinity wasn't there. But I didn't know it. I just knew there was an emptiness. I'm saying, I'm getting empty. I am empty, but I'm not full. And I said, what's the fullness? It's not just about emptying out our minds. There's a presence that's supposed to be arriving here, and it hasn't arrived for me. And then when I met the Sufi master, he said that what's missing is the divine presence.
Yes.
And he said, emptying is beautiful, but without divinity, without God, without Allah, without the oneness, you don't have what you need. And so I said, okay. I said, how do I reach to know this presence? Because I want that
Yes.
more than anything in the world. And his answer was, you need to remember the name of God frequently. You need to pray frequently. And you need to focus your life on learning what the divine is asking from you each moment and following it.
Wow.
So, because a lot of times in religion, right, we pray and
Yeah.
you do, if you go to, to the temple, right, you pray, you do your things, and you go home. You go to the
Yeah.
church, you do Sunday, you go home.
Yeah.
But what's going on the rest of the time?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so in Sufism, we learn that direct connection to God, to Allah, and we then focus on it, and in time, that light begins to communicate very clearly to you. And then, of course, in time, not only does it clearly communicate to you, it begins to move into you. You begin to
Yes.
merge with that. And eventually, it reveals all sorts of great states of knowledge, which are really where I believe the miracles come from.
I was just going to say
Yeah.
that when you're in that space, then you're able to receive miracles,
Yes,
and also able to participate in generating them around you.
exactly.
Both of those. Yeah.
And we practice a few things. One of the things that I hear my husband say all the time, and this is why I love sharing our date with great people too, is how is Source calling me to serve?
Yeah.
And so
I
that's
was like, just like you said that
that's
same thing.
That
was, yeah.
same teaching. Sufism and healing is all about movement
Yes.
as well. Source is moving constantly.
Yes.
There is a spinning that's occurring. And in that spinning, in that movement, what shows up for us is a stillness. When you tap into that stillness, all of the expressions that need to occur on the outer begin to happen. And in the listening, connecting, deeply being present with this movement that's moving through all of us, all of the healing and the miraculous become available, whether it's a virus, a dis-ease,
Yeah.
a heart condition,
Yes.
or
Yes.
even a conversation with a beloved that's very scary to have. If you sit with Source, if you sit with the movement, the thing that's beating our heart,
Yes.
and you let yourself be available, because part of your story has been, you're leaving us with a cliffhanger right now. You were 36, you were in a marriage, there was this cardiologist, this diagnosis by a cardiologist. You're now so take us on this journey. You're now in India. What's happening with your life, with your relationships, as you're waking up in the scenario of your relationship with the divine?
Well, like anything, when you start to let the divine in, there's a kickback.
Yes.
Because if you bring the higher light in, the shadow fights it,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And it's unfortunately, but that's really what happens always.
The bigger the light, the bigger the shadow as well. And it's one of our things about society that we're all collectively, I believe, waking up to, that to everything there is a shadow.
Yes.
And to embrace the shadow as well. The shadow being when you're angry. The shadow being the parts of yourself that you don't want anyone to see.
Yes.
The parts that you think are unlovable.
Yes.
The parts of your own family history
Yes.
that your parents have said, don't air dirty laundry, don't share that, don't share that. And then it becomes part of your genetics to carry forward.
Well, and for men, it's even just being emotional.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's like, don't do that here. And of course, then you have the conditions for disease. If you're unable to let energy flow through you in a natural way. So
Exactly. We
Yeah.
cut our systems down,
Yeah.
and we start repressing.
yeah.
Yes.
And of course, like anything in the human body, if we repress any thought or emotion, it goes somewhere.
Yeah.
Of course, there's a science to it, but it does go in the body and sticks to some place.
All cancers are irritations of the outer boundary layer. And so an emotional irritation over and over and over again, an emotional
Yes.
resistance over and over and over again
Yes.
is going to create a cancer based on dis-ease, that pushing of energy back.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And all diseases are ultimately emanating from something like that.
Yeah.
And so our job is to, the first step is, Rumi said, you don't have to learn to love. You just have to polish the rust off your heart so it reflects the light.
Yes.
And that's the same with healing. You don't really have to heal. You just have to polish the places where we repress our emotions or our memories, or the places we're afraid to accept spirit, and open to those places. And then most of the time, healing happens very quickly.
Yeah.
It doesn't, there's always sometimes that there are deeper teachings,
Yeah.
that are needed. But I would say my experience is that, I work with a lot of stage 4 cancers now. I work with a lot of end stage, mostly end stage disease. We've had tremendous healing just from connecting people to their emotions, bringing in the light of God, and supporting them. And spirit changes people. It just opens them up. So that's, I think, the real work. I'm happy to, and I'll give chemo when needed, and I'll give, herbs always. But the real work is what you said, right?
Yeah.
Which is to really get to those deeper reasons. And that takes, great strength, because we have to be willing to look. It's amazing where most people, I find, it's difficult for them to look inside themselves. Like when they look inside, they hit their shame. They hit their fears. They don't want to know that maybe they're not that smart in some area, or maybe their brother or their sister did something that they couldn't do, or they had to repress their anger because of something in their family, constellation.
Yeah.
But if you're going to heal, my experience is you have to embrace the truth. The truth is the healer. It starts with truth. What's real?
And that's the journey of Miracle Makers, is to begin that now.
Yes.
So you don't have to wait until crisis creates that,
Exactly.
need to do that. Yeah, you want to start now in
And
that journey of healing yourself emotionally, opening your heart, doing the practices so you can allow a spirit in instead of waiting for that crisis to happen.
That's so right what you're saying.
Yeah.
And I think you were teaching that this weekend as well. This is a course that you teach as well, and amplify. How do you start that process with history and family history or the lineage?
Well, for me, the first step is the connection to God, because when you connect to God, the light of truth shows up. And without the light of truth, you might end up lying to yourself. So that you need that truth to tell you what's right.
Yeah.
Okay. Once you start with that, then the second thing is you have to become quiet and simply get out of the way. And then when you do that, I call it the bubbling happens. The bubbling just starts to open, and all that stuff we push down begins to come up, and we just need presence. We don't have to do anything, really. All we need to do is be present and just not say no. Just say, okay, wow, I don't know what that means. Wow, oh, this really hurts. It's coming up. I don't know what it means. And then all of a sudden you say, oh my God, my father loved my brother or sister more than me. Oh my God, that was so painful.
Yeah.
I can't believe how much that hurt. And then another thing bubbles up. Oh my God, that was the time I failed a test in 3rd grade or something. And you know what I mean? There seems
Right.
simple things,
Yeah.
but so powerful.
So powerful, yeah.
And you don't go searching for them. You're just present. And you're present with, I'm connecting to source. I'm stilling my mind. I'm breathing. Whatever comes up is okay.
Yes.
And in the process of purification,
Yes.
in that breath, whatever needs to be healed comes up and begins to share itself and reveal itself. And you feel the emotion. you process the emotion, you
Exactly.
release the emotion.
That's right. And of course, again, the key, the master key is you have to hold it in that divine light.
Yes.
Because if the divine light is present, then not only do you process it, but you process it divinely,
Yeah.
right?
Which is true healing. Yeah.
It's true
Right.
healing.
Yeah, that's the true healing. Right there.
Because for some people in the scenario thinking, oh, my dad loved my sister more than me, or my brother more than me, they might go into blame.
Exactly.
And when you go into blame, it creates more of the disconnection from source.
Right.
And I break up the word blame as be lame. And when we find ourselves saying, oh, it was because of this, we lame or take away our own power. We somehow say or don't fully engage in what was possible or take responsibility for it.
Yes, you're right. You're exactly right.
And I loved when you brought up shame as well. When most emotions come down to a core emotion as well, and the energy that it takes to hold that creates acid in our body, creates stress in our bodies, creates it. And there's one of these sayings that's something, you're only as sick as your secrets. Whatever you can't share
Right.
with another human being can be causing that dis-ease
Right.
within yourself as well. And I
Right.
think one of the ancient, within Sufi, within the Essene, within the Kabbalistic teachings, they were all in the same region at the same time being developed. And all of the cores of truth there involve sharing what you're feeling. Could you speak on that just a little bit?
Well, I mean, again, remember that disease is essentially repression, right? So we repress something and we push it where? In a liver, and we get hepatitis. Well, most liver hepatitis is anger.
Yeah.
Okay, because the liver generates anger. But if the anger comes up and you don't stop it in your liver and you repress it in your hands because you really want to strangle somebody, but you don't let it out, what do you get? Rheumatoid arthritis.
Yeah.
Right? So each system has to do with where you repress the anger. So every organ system has emotions. They come forward, they come out, and then we stop them. But the secret, in my experience, is something actually different. This is what I learned from the Sufis, which was that it really isn't the actual repressive emotions that cause the problem. It's actually the divine teaching that's trying to unfold itself within the emotional state where the resistance in the teaching really comes from.
Wow. And so to really say that, whatever you're feeling with emotion is meant to be shared by you.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yes, you share it and you bring it out and you express it.
Yes.
But then you realize that, it's not only about expression of anger. It's like, what is God asking us to learn? Because life
Yes.
is a learning.
Yeah.
What do we want? What is it? Is it strength? Are you angry because you feel weak? Are you angry because you don't want to look, so you need awareness?
Yeah.
Are you angry because you're blaming and you're not in self-responsibility?
Yeah.
So you see, behind every disease there are hidden aspects which are really needed. And it's not easy for us, but if we can find those cores and really be willing to understand what I call divine unfoldment, which means what are the qualities like compassion or mercy or awareness or love or whatever, and unfold them, the diseases just often disappear very easily, like fruits falling off a tree. They just fall out. They just dissolve. It's very interesting.
And in medicine might say it's miraculous healing, but ultimately it's almost like the way our system was designed originally Well, and we are miracles. So
we are
so
miracles.
it's a miraculous
It's
system. Yeah.
a miraculous system that
But it shouldn't
takes
surprise us.
right.
Yeah.
It takes spirit into emotion, into mental, into a physical expression. Everything starts off with the spirit of it first, and then emotion, energy in motion comes in, and then we have this mental where we label it and we make it mean something, and we give it words and languaging based on our own reference point of languaging. This was one of the most interesting studies that I learned about. Deaf children that didn't have language didn't remember or process their emotions or their spirituality. They didn't have memory until they had language. Deaf children taught in Mexico at whatever age began to have memory and began to understand emotions based on the level of their vocabulary. They only knew happy and sad. Those were the extremes. And when they differentiated out joy, elation, or sad, a little bit sad, melancholy, when they learned different words, they had different expressions of the emotions themselves based on spirituality, and they had no memories until they had language. And that brought it forward into the physical world. I love something that you said just a couple minutes ago, which I just want to really land on a great deal, because if you've got something that's creating dis-ease in your body, it goes to the physical level of creating dis-ease, and it's gotten trapped in an emotion, mental words, spirit behind it. If you begin to unravel what it is, and you take that into your soul's purpose and become a teacher of that emotion, of the shadow, of what used to cause you anger, what used to cause you fear, you then are going into the spirit energy of releasing that in your lineage and releasing that for everyone that's holding that frequency as well. And that really truly hit me, because you become the source of the healing of what was before causing you illness.
Sorry. Excuse me. Yeah. And I think, again, it's this, there's two pieces. There's the piece of everything you're saying, which is the taking responsibility,
Yes.
and the expression, and the awareness, and the willingness to dive deep in yourself, all the things. And then the other side of it is the other hand coming down from divinity, which is also sharing what it wants, which is for you to know it, and for you to open your heart to receive its blessings. And it's actually these two hands coming together, which I think really leads to the greatest healing in my experience. And I'll tell you a great story, which I've told many times, but that's one of my favorites, was a man who had melanoma. And he had a large tumor on his face. He was a concentration camp survivor.
Wow.
And Jewish. And he had watched, a lot of what goes on in those camps. And he left his religion because he didn't understand, how this could go on. So he just couldn't, he lost his faith. Well, then here he is, 7 years old, and he ends up with this malignant melanoma, very aggressive, and he starts doing the first hand, which is, the emotional work and trying to get to understanding his anger and what's going on in that tumor, which he did great. And the tumor would change borders, which, I'm sure as healers you've seen, and I've seen many times, it shifts, it rotates, it changes, but doesn't go away. And then he realized that he had left his religion, he left his faith. So he then made what we call tauba, which is he returned back to his faith. He returned back to God. He said, I sobbed for 48 hours nonstop because all the pain of the concentration camps came out of my heart. And at the end of the time, he fell asleep that night, And he had a dream, and in the dream, an angel came down and went into his face and took the tumor out, showed it to him, and then disappeared. And he woke up in the morning, and he goes to the mirror, and sure enough, the entire tumor had disappeared in his sleep.
Wow.
Isn't that amazing?
It is amazing. It truly is. And for everyone sitting and listening to this, or driving and listening, miracles, one day we will understand the science behind them. But until we do, take these words literally, to feel the emotion, to connect in, to allow your awareness to give that full attention, whatever is causing the dis-ease or disharmony. Give your full awareness, attention, and allow one hand, you bringing it, and with the other hand, allowing Source.
There you go.
Saying the names of Source. Saying the names of love. Saying the name of God. And letting that continue to fill the space until the angels or come and elevate you back into your state of grace.
That is it. That is it. That is the science of miracles.
Yes.
You just said it.
We are learning so much through this conversation, and in the stillness that can only emerge from a connection to our heart and connection to everything, our brain, every emotion, every mental aspect. In that, we create a space.
Yes.
In that space, we create the miraculous to come in without attachment to what it is.
Yes.
We'll know, because the symptom for you, it was being able to see. Also, again, being for the miraculous coming in and informing you.
Yeah. Well, I think we're right on it. This is where for me, we're on the secrets of miracles and the secrets of healing. And it's these are the master two steps, consciousness about your process with responsibility and willingness to change, along with surrender to divinity and receiving the downpouring of divine light and the qualities and the names of God in a state of deep surrender. And I think if those two things exist side by side, that's the secret of miracles. That's how it happens.
Yes. Oh.
And I'm thinking, as you're talking, I was like, how do we teach our kids this? How do we begin this process early enough so that they can step into that when they're so fresh still, when there's less,
complications, mental
baggage.
programming that
mental programming,
adults quite often have that programming, but children don't.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I know you mentioned earlier your homeschooling. I think that's a very good way of keeping the sort of traditional programming out, right?
Yeah.
But I think the real key I have found is first of all, to know that each child is its own tree. Like, I might be a lemon tree, my child might be an orange tree. You know what I mean?
Yes, we have some grape trees and some all kinds of
mango trees.
That's nice. We've got a mango.
And I'm definitely a nut tree. I don't even do fruit. I'm just a walnut. Yeah.
Right, you're the walnut, and if you try to place walnut on mango, it doesn't work. So the key is actually, be the true walnut tree you are, but at the same time, let the child develop as a mango.
Yeah.
And teach it to be the best mango it can be.
Yeah.
I think that's the key.
Dr. Jaffe, you also won Man of Peace Award in 2010. You've won the hearts. You've won our hearts. No. It's so much here on air. How do people get in touch with you, for those that are, because we'll share more, but I want them to hear now. Again, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
The best way is to go to my website,
yes.
drjaffemd.com, DRJAFFEMD.com. And if you do /brilliance, There is an offer there where you can receive both a lecture on self-healing and also a lecture on brilliance, which goes over some of the key names of God that help to wash away the limitations in our subconscious that keep us from manifesting our divine
Yes.
purpose.
It's so beautiful and so important to get this gift that's
Yeah.
on your website. The sources, until we have our own system, each one of us has our own path
Yes.
to the divine, just like the walnut tree can't be the mango tree,
Right.
can't have your seed that lives inside you will sprout with your own connection to source.
Yes.
But until you have your own map in place, it's really great and important to find those that are already practicing it and exemplifying it and allowing it to come forward so beautifully. And so your website has those gifts that are involved. What are some of what are some of the projects you're working on right now? What's coming up next for you?
Well, I mean, personally, I don't know about you, but I assume with the level of consciousness I'm experiencing here, that you are also aware of the kind of the massive changes that are going on both globally and in the inner dimensions. It's a very strong time.
Yes.
And I feel that the first step is we need to have some safe ships, is the way I call it, places where people, when they kind of hit this very strong confusion, sense of loss of faith, loss of purpose, that there's a place they can go to have safety.
Yes.
And so for me, my first job is trying to create these sort of oases where people can find safety in themselves, because of the strength of the global situation is so powerful right now.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the second thing is we're working, of course, on an orphanage, and I love children, and I love to have, the children that need help and love
Yeah.
are the most special.
Yeah.
So we're slowly developing that process as well.
That's so beautiful. And if our kids receive the wisdom now
Yes.
and the security now, the world that they will be in will be so different from the world that we grew in. And the world that we grew in, we're witnessing what's happening. This part of division so far between neighbors, cultures, all of it. If you're listening to this and you hear us, we'd love for you to be the one that reaches out, knocks on your neighbor's door and says, hello, we're strangers, but I want to change that. Or the person that you see that might be struggling, and you might have just one or two words of kindness or wisdom that you can muster out and from the love of your heart. Be the one that emerges and gives to your neighbor, someone that you see suffering. If you've got it in you to be the leader in this, truly we can transform the world. The world that we've inherited is not the one that we need to live in. And if you're listening, Miracle Maker, and you can do something kind and supportive, and if someone comes to you and shares something that's been hurtful, you allow yourself to empathize, to connect first, and then to move that conversation into a conversation of what's possible. And so, Miracle Makers, we're so glad that you were with us on this journey. Any words that you'd love to share?
It was such a profound conversation today, because ultimately there can be complexity. I was sitting there listening to her interviewing Nassim Haramein yesterday. I was like a deer in the head spotlight. I could not understand. The language is so intense. But it's really miracles and healing and deeper understanding is very accessible. But so it's there and it's accessible. So I don't know. It's almost like, don't try and make it complicated.
Exactly. You're exactly right. It's so simple. Life is simple.
Yeah.
and we make it so complex.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being with us, Dr. Jaffe. Thank you, Miracle Makers. Please subscribe. Please rate us. Please share this. We're so grateful for you. So grateful.
Thank you. Thank you both.
Thank you,
Beautiful.
Tony.